It's championship week, ladies and gentlemen, so me and Clint decided to break the game down for you in detail. We bring out our special guest from Austin who covers the Texas Longhorns, and we get to break it down ourselves as well. All that and more on The Old Poke Show. Welcome to The Old Poke Show. This is the show where we talk to Cowboy legends from the past and the present and review the OSU program going into the future. I'm your host, Deion Imade, alongside, as always, my man, Clint Chelf himself, number 10. What's going on, baby?
Second episode this week.
Yeah.
And obviously special occasion with the Big 12 championship game up. I just wanted to update the viewers because if you listened to the first one already, you had to listen to me cough all the way through it. That my cough is actually better. So this one should be a little bit easier to listen to for you guys. Hopefully, I don't cough nearly as much, but we'll see how it goes. I don't know.
I'm sure they understand, man. That thing is going all over the place. Like everybody left and right is talking about being under the weather. So you guys, we're human. It's a surprise.
You seem to be dodging it, though. I wonder if that's because you don't have any kids, maybe? I don't know.
You're
not, because I know you're going out.
I didn't escape it, Clint. It was
okay.
It was an interesting Thanksgiving. Let's just put it that way.
Okay.
I done got it and went past it, and I'm over it. I'm taking the medicine. I'm all good. So
I'm glad to see you survived. So
yeah. But with that being the case, you just mentioned it being a special week. Again, this is our second episode of the week because of how great it is to be going to the Big 12 championship. And because it's such a special week and such a special game, we thought we'd bring in a special guest as well. How about you cool with that, Clint? Cool with that?
I'm good with it. I think you guys are gonna really enjoy this guy, enjoy his opinions and his insight for the Big 12 championship game against Texas. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yes. So without any, hesitations, let's go ahead and bring him in. The 3-time Emmy winner, 7-time Texas AP Broadcaster of the Year, sports director for KEYE in Austin, Bob Ballou. Bob, how's it going?
It's going great. I got to start with something though here because I've been pretty excited to come on with you guys since Jason gave me the invite, and there's a good reason for it because I wanted, before we get into Texas Oklahoma State, I wanted to talk about AT&T Stadium because I went to Mizzou and I thought Clint might want to talk a little bit about the 2014 Cotton Bowl, and here's the
saboteur.
Here's the reason I want to bring this up though. Honestly, you were awesome. And like as a Mizzou fan watching that game, I was terrified on that final drive. You had been so good all game. You were obviously a blast to watch in college. So this is it's got a real treat for me to get on with you guys and get to talk about this week, but also have a little fun with that game because you were fantastic. And I at least wanted to get that part of it out there. I'm not here to rub anything in as much as I am to tell you how great you guys were and how much fun it was to watch you guys play.
I appreciate that. I wish I wouldn't have had, I don't even remember now, 2 or 3 turnovers, but that game was awesome. That front, I'll never forget that front 7. I mean,
Michael Sam,
Tony Ely, Michael Sam. I think Shane Ray was drafted the following year. They had some dudes. James Franklin. Yeah, it was a tough one to lose, but I felt like I went out on my shield a little bit. I tried to at least. So I appreciate that. I didn't know you were going to bring that up. I didn't know. So you know what? It's a natural reaction. I appreciate it. Obviously, I wish the score would have been a little different, but it was. It's always fun going back there.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, you had such a decorated career, and I think as you get further away from it, you can appreciate things more, even if it's a win or a loss or whatever it is. Being a Mizzou guy, obviously really since that game into, I think maybe they had one more good year, and then it's been about 8 or 9 years since they got good, and now they're 10-2 this year under Eli Drinkwitz. But it's an interesting sport. I think we all crave it every fall, and now that we're like already in late November, early December, we're like, how is this season already done?
Yeah.
And it's crazy how fast it goes by. But we obviously have a little bit more of some fun stuff this week and some fun stuff as we get into bowl season too.
Yeah, that Missouri team's pretty good. I watched them play Kansas State earlier in the year. Luther Burden, that guy is for real. He is good. So yeah, I'm glad we're hopefully going to miss them maybe this year. I guess we could play them, I guess, at some point.
Yeah.
Could be
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, get a win against Texas, you'll go to a New Year's Six Bowl, and Missouri will certainly be in one. So
yeah,
you never know how that could match up.
Yeah.
Speaking of fun and Mizzou and Austin, Texas, what's going on with this office decor over here? Like, is that Mizzou colors? Is that Texas Longhorn burnt orange? Is like what we got back there?
We moved into this office probably 10, 11 years ago. I've been here 17 years. We probably moved in 10, 11, 12 years ago, and they painted it this color before we got in here. So we didn't really have a say in it. I would say I never know with what actual shade of orange people consider burnt orange versus Tennessee orange versus Oklahoma State orange. That's like on camera, this may look one way and it may be something different in person. But I know everybody that comes into the office likes to prefer, they say it's burnt orange just because we're in Austin.
Correct.
It's probably closer to burnt orange than it is anything else. But I did not design it. I will say that. And I've got like golf pictures on the wall. It's like Ben Hogan and Arnold Palmer, and we've got all kinds of random stuff back here. I've actually got a Big 12 clock that I want to put up on the wall that is the original Big 12, like Nebraska, Colorado, A&M, Mizzou. I got to put that one up at some point because that's been a good one.
You've got a guy that's bit with the golf bug over here, Deion. I guess this way on my screen. Yeah. He's ate up with it right now, so you're gonna have to get a couple of those pictures, I think, Deion, to put up there, get the same thing.
How's the game?
I feel like my game has to I at least have to break 100 before I start putting up pictures anywhere. At least.
Hey, we've all been there. We've all been there.
Just start with chipping and putting because nothing else matters. That's what I always try to tell people when they're starting.
That's right.
So they say. So speaking of chipping and putting, we're talking about championships in this one right here. Guys, the Big 12 championship, Texas versus Oklahoma State. General thoughts, I mean, to kind of start this one off, Bob. What did you think about, first of all, Texas and OSU playing in this last one as Texas is leaving the conference?
I mean, had to play one more time, right? I mean, you couldn't get out of this conference without these two teams playing one more time. They've had such a decorated history between the two of them since Big 12 play started. You think back to how Texas dominated this series in the early goings of the Big 12, never lost. Even, go back to 2004 when they were up 35-7 in Austin. They came back and won. It was I can't remember what the score was at the half in Stillwater in the national championship season of 2005. And Texas came all the way back and won that game. And then in 2010, it just dramatically flips. And Mike Gundy figures something out in Mac Brown and starts beating him every year. They're 9-4 against the Horns in the last 13 years, 6-2 in the last 8. I mean, Mike Gundy's figured this team out, figured this program out. And I know Texas has had down years since then, but still had a very competitive team a lot of years. And I think more than anything, it speaks to how good Mike Gundy is, how underappreciated nationally Mike Gundy is, probably sometimes how underappreciated he is in Stillwater. And people, you go through a year like last year where you win 7 and starts to, well, what's next? How are they ever going to recover? You lose to South Alabama at home, and everybody's like, the program's a disaster. And all of a sudden you're in the Big 12 championship game. And it's like, wow, it's amazing how quickly things can turn around. So I think everybody is that enjoys college football is excited to see them play one more time. Texas has gone through this season of everybody wanting to get one last shot at them. I mean, everybody talking trash before the week. You hear Baylor, you hear Iowa State, you hear Texas Tech, you hear TCU, Houston, all these teams that even some of the coaches said, Dave Aranda said it, Dana Holgerson said it. In the offseason, everybody was coming up to him saying, we don't care if you go 1-11 this year, just beat Texas. And it's amazing to hear a coach say that's like an honest truth. So, it's been a season for Texas where I think there's this arrogance on the Texas side of we're always going to get everybody's best shot. We're Texas and blah, 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 blah. But it's been true this year. I mean, they've been the target of every team because a lot of these teams know we're probably not going to get to play Texas again for a really long time, if at all. And so it's been interesting to go on the road with this team and see how, the venom from the outside for other schools and what they felt about Texas. And, I know that's certainly no different in Stillwater. I know a lot of people there hate Texas, and that's for for a lot of reasons, a lot of good reasons that people have to hate Texas. But I think in the end, this has been a really fun year for Steve Sarkisian to get his team to really come into what he wanted when he got here 3 years ago and see the progress that they've made throughout this year to be now 11-1 and getting the one thing that he's wanted for the 3 years that he since he got here, which was to win a Big 12 championship and they get that opportunity Saturday morning.
Yeah, I think Texas Tech got a little bit of that your mark medicine taken out on him last week, and some of that trash talk kind of backfired there. But I wanted to start with just, that was a good general overview, and then kind of keep it pretty general because I know people don't want to go into specifics on stuff like this. But what's the health like for the Longhorns?
Yeah.
I saw this last week. Xavier Worthy, for example, was a guy that got rolled up, came off, came back in. I mean, I didn't know what was going on with him. So kind of what's the general health for the team at the moment?
Yeah, Sark was he keeps that stuff pretty close to the vest. If you ask him anything about anyone, he'll say either, yeah, they're questionable for this week, or yeah, they practiced. And that's pretty much about all you'll get. Xavier Worthy and Malik Murphy, the backup quarterback, both did practice early this week, which is a really good sign for Texas. Obviously, Xavier Worthy's been tremendous for this school for 3 years. And he's a big part of what has made their offense go. He was basically couldn't walk 2 different times in the first half. They carried him to the locker room, could barely put pressure on his legs. He wouldn't even say after the game what was wrong. He just said he got rolled up on from behind on a play, and it looked a lot scarier than it was. But then he came out and played the entire second half. So my assumption is he will play on Saturday. I think the biggest question mark for Texas right now is cornerback Ryan Watts. And he went down on the first play of the game against Texas Tech with a back injury. When he is in the game, the Texas back secondary is so much stronger and plays so much better. He's been such a key cog for them. The Kansas State game, they had 4th and goal in overtime, and they decided to go for it. And Watts basically made the play that won that game. He showed that they were going to be in zone and then showed they were going to be in man and flipped to zone, passed a guy off. Kansas State didn't have an option. They sacked Will Howard. So he's critical. He's questionable. We don't know if he's going to play Saturday or not. But that's really the only injury that Sark's indicated was would be a true blow to Texas if they played this game Saturday without Ryan Watts.
So now that we've talked about the injury report, let's talk about the guy that kind of gets Worthy the ball, Quinn Ewers. He's kind of been a synonymous figure in college football, especially since he's, came from South Lake Carroll, went to Ohio State, then transfers to Texas. What's his year been like over there in Austin? How has everybody felt about his play and the kind of trajectory he's been on?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're the number one quarterback in the country and you have all this pressure on you and all these thoughts of who you can be, I think when you don't throw for 6,000 yards and 40 touchdowns and have a completion percentage of 80%, everybody kind of goes, what's going on with you? Like, why are you not? Quinn's been really good for this offense. Now, he's had moments where, like every quarterback does, where he doesn't play as well. But, like, you go to the Alabama game, they go on the road to Tuscaloosa, and he just looks dynamite. They had really missed on deep balls. That was a big issue last year and then into the early part of this year. And he hit on a couple of those against Alabama, and you kind of went, okay, that's what they needed. But then you see some inconsistencies as the year's gone on. He's a real calming force in this offense. He's completing 70% of his passes. He's been terrific. It's more that the run game's been good. The defense has been really good. So that to the point that when Texas has a few struggles on offense and they don't put teams away like they didn't against TCU, they didn't against Houston, everybody starts to bring up questions. I think everybody's – just to take this one step further to the SEC next year, everybody's really excited about Arch Manning, obviously. He's a key figure. He's got the Manning last name, all those things. Got an enormous ovation Friday night when they played Texas Tech. But when you go into the SEC next year, because there's talk of Quinn coming back, can you really be disappointed if he decided to come back next year and you've got a third-year quarterback going into your first year in the SEC? Because I feel like there's this outside like, man, we need Arch now. Let's get Arch in. Now Arch is going to be our guy for the next 3 years. But that's a freshman quarterback going into the SEC. So I think Quinn's been really good. I don't think he's been the Heisman Trophy contender that maybe people thought he would be. He was injured for a couple games. He missed a couple games with an injury, the shoulder injury, his second in 2 years. But I do think he's been good, and I think it's almost like an understated good, where he'll be, like against Oklahoma, he turns the ball over twice on their first 2 possessions, and then I think he was like 30 of 33 the rest of the game. But people don't really bring that part of it up. It's always, well, he threw the 2 picks early and it put him in a hole and whatever. So he hasn't been elite. He hasn't been Bo Nix or Michael Penix or Jaden Daniels, but he's been really good. And I think more than anything, a stabilizing force on offense, so that teams have to, respect Texas throwing the ball. You can't just load the box, because their running game, there were a lot of question marks going into this year about their running game. They were never able to just load the box and say, okay, well, Quinn's got to beat us, because the run game's been really good too. So I think they've been very balanced offensively, and it's been a little inconsistent, but I think Quinn in the end has been really good this year for Texas.
I'm glad you brought that part up, because as I can attest, the fans always want the new thing. They always want the younger guy. So I can kind of relate a little bit to what he's going through.
The backup quarterback's everybody's favorite player. I mean, there's no doubt.
Exactly. Yeah. Speaking on Quinn Ewers, something we talked about a little bit before the show is one of his worst games in college was last year against this Oklahoma State team. Different defensive coordinator, obviously, but he seems like a guy to me, and I've just seen, a few interviews here and there. He seems like he's got a great head on his shoulders, a calm guy, very good leader, like you mentioned in the locker room. Do you think, is there any part of him you think that's circling getting to play these guys again and getting to run that back against, kind of erase that memory?
Yeah, I think so. I think for a couple points for him, he lost his final high school game. He lost in the state title game to Westlake, an Austin school, and it was at AT&T Stadium. So I know there's like that part of it where he needs to go there and play well. And then also, obviously, what happened against Oklahoma State last year. And it was an interesting game, too. Sark brought that up a little bit this week. Early on when Quinn missed a few throws, receivers were dropping balls, and the offensive line didn't give him time on a few throws that were open. And I think with a freshman quarterback, which is what he was last year, as a freshman quarterback, some of those things kind of start, you speed things up and you're not as good. And he was just not very good in the second half. I think he finished 19 of 49. And but even in those moments, I think those were huge learning moments for him, because he did have a couple of those games last year. And I think those were huge learning moments for him of how he could move forward as a quarterback. And yeah, I do think for Quinn, he doesn't say much when you talk to him in interviews. He's very short and to the point, and doesn't give you a lot of kind of the emotion or what he's feeling. But I know we've seen some things behind the scenes where he's a very fiery leader in the locker room. He has those moments as a quarterback, and I think he's very excited to get another chance because of what happened last year in Stillwater. And I think that's kind of been an MO for Texas this year. There have been a lot of, last year this happened. We really don't want that to happen again. Yeah, last year we lost to Tech in overtime. We took that with us. We lost to Iowa State. We took that with us. Those kind of things, I think, have really kind of driven this team as they've kind of progressed through the year.
Speaking of, I don't want to make this a Quinn Ewers, interview, but like they talk.
Hey, it's a quarterback's most important. So
you can do that. Bob, see what I have to deal with?
I knew that was coming.
But I was listening to the game when they played OU, and they talked about Quinn Ewers and going to a sports psychologist and feeling some of the pressure. You talked about being like the #1 quarterback in high school and all this pressure, especially being the Texas Longhorns starting quarterback. There's pressure with that. Now you're talking about this game and playing where he played his last high school game and last high school loss in the state championship, facing off against OSU where he didn't had one of his worst, college games. How do you think he handles that type of pressure? And then kind of go on to talk about the team and the pressure they're also facing in this game.
Yeah, I think both of those things are great points. I think number one for Quinn, one of the things he's been really, really good at since he arrived at Texas last year was if he throws a touchdown pass, he's the same quarterback when he comes back out if he throws an interception.
Yeah.
And I think that's really hard to do. I think you saw it snowball at Oklahoma State. But even on that final drive when they were down 7, he threw a dart to Jatavion Sanders over the middle, and it went right through his chest, and it was picked off. He's really good at putting stuff behind him, and I think that's as Clint can attest, that's an enormous battle for a quarterback to not let the interceptions or the fumbles get to you. And against Oklahoma, when you turn it over in that atmosphere, to throw a pick on your second play of the game, and then the next possession to throw another pick, and you fumble a ball later, like all of those things are devastating to a lot of quarterbacks. Quinn came right back and just started. He was fine. Like next throw, he's good. And I think that's been key for him. I think that's what's made him so good this year, is just his ability to put stuff behind him and move on. So I do think there's something to that. As for the pressure for this Texas team, it's kind of like both sides of it. The first side is all they've talked about was winning a Big 12 championship. When they came back from last year, they went into the summer, they went into workouts. Sark said we started hammering that. Like, don't worry about the national picture. Let's worry about winning a Big 12 championship. We've got this road of he started the phrase for them, embrace the hate. We heard a lot about that when we were at AT&T Stadium in July for Big 12 Media Days, and then kind of as it progressed through the preseason. Embrace the hate. And they knew they were going to get a lot of hate when they went on the road this year. They knew they were going to feel that from a lot of different teams. There is pressure on that side because this is what they wanted. I think there's not pressure on the national scale because they're ranked 7th right now. And as much as you want to say, well, if this happens or that happens or whatever, they kind of can go out there and play loose, because if they lose, they lose. If they win, they still might not get into the playoffs. So I don't know that there's a real pressure from that standpoint. I think the pressure that they're going to put on themselves is just based on wanting to win the Big 12 title and accomplish these goals they've wanted to accomplish for 3 years under Sark. But I do think some of that stuff can get to you. I think what they've done so well this year is prepare well. Every week Sark's talked so much about that on Thursdays when we asked him a lot, like, what does your team feel like this week? How have they, and every week he's like, it's the same old. Like we just come in every week. They started calling every game a Big 12 championship after they lost to Oklahoma, because they knew if they lost again, they would have no shot at getting into the game. And they started kind of approaching every week like, we have to win this week if we're going to have a chance to win the Big 12 championship. If we don't win this week, it doesn't matter. And it's the same thing with the college football playoff. If they lose Saturday, they have no chance of getting into the college football playoff. They know that. So they can just approach it like, we've got to go prepare this week. We've got to be good on Tuesday so we can be good on Wednesday and get better and better as the week goes on. And as cliche as all that stuff is, this team's really bought into it, and they seem to really kind of thrive off it every week. And it showed. I mean, they're 11-1 playing for the Big 12 championship, which is what they want.
I was very shocked to see Texas at 7 with what I would consider probably the top win in the country.
Definitely, yeah.
And with a chance, if they win this game and don't get in, I will just be absolutely blown away. But I did want to talk about, since obviously both of us have played against Texas teams, and when we came out there to play, at least I knew, maybe it's just me being a realist or whatever, I knew that Texas was more talented than us, and they typically are. So what makes, and this is an exceptional team. I think it's one of the most talented teams in the last 10 years that I've seen, 15 years. Even the ones we played against had a ton of talent. This team has more talent. What makes this team different? Is it Sark being in there? Is it Ewers? Is it just leadership at good positions? Or what kind of makes them different than those past Texas teams?
I think, number one, this team does have more talent than, to me, any team since 2008. I thought the 08 team that Texas had was better than the 09 team. The 09 team played Alabama for the national championship in the game. Of course, Colt got hurt. But that 08 team was just off the charts good, and they lost a bunch of guys off that team. The talent on that team, to me, is comparable to the talent on this team. And funny enough, they're in the same position where the 08 team beat Oklahoma 45-35, and then Oklahoma was the team that played for the national championship because Texas lost to Texas Tech. It kind of feels that same way this year. Like the Oklahoma loss this year is going to be the game that cost Texas, which is amazing. Now, look, if there are 4 undefeateds when we get to Saturday night and Texas doesn't get in, fine. I get it. The thing I can't figure out is why there's not more of a debate about Oregon and their one loss and versus Texas and their one loss, their strength of schedule, those type of things. Same thing goes for like an Ohio State, what people want them in. But all that stuff, again, in the end, that'll all play itself out.
I'm going to say something crazy because they're undefeated, but there has to be a conversation about Florida State losing a quarterback. It changes the whole dynamic of the team. And if you want the 4 best teams, I'm not sure Florida State with the backup quarterback is better than Texas.
No. And I'm with you on that. And I think there was, Greg McElroy was really trying to hammer that point home, and it was almost like he was getting cut off about it because he was going back through in 2015, Michigan State was not one of the 4 best teams, and they still got into the playoff because they were undefeated. Ohio State was not one of the best teams in 16, yet they got in because they only had 1 loss. If we talk so much about the eye test and Oregon's better than Texas just based on the eye test, well, don't we use the same eye test to tell us that Florida State's not as good as some of these,
Right,
so
exactly.
You can get into all those things. I think there are so many scenarios that could play out on Saturday. If Alabama beats Georgia, this thing's going to go through a totally different direction because how do you pick which team to put in when Texas won at Alabama by 10, but Alabama just now probably has the best win in the country by beating number 1 Georgia. And there are all these things you can go through all these scenarios. And that's what this time of year makes so much fun. I think when the committee comes out and, they asked about why is Oregon ahead of Texas? And he says, well, Bo Nix is completing 78% of his passes. It's like, how is that even a talking point for what we're talking about right here? And I'm not even saying Oregon's not better than Texas. They might be. They've been fantastic. But you could just get into so many of these points when it comes to this stuff. And that's what makes college football great. That's why I think we're all glad we're going to a 12-team playoff next year, because if 13 gets left out, fine. We're not going to worry about 13 and 14 being upset about this. But if you've got a situation like this where we might end up with 4 or 5 one-loss teams, and you got to pick one of them or 2 of them, it's going to be tough to get into that.
So sorry about that, because I kind of led you on the path down the talking about the rankings, because I wanted to talk about them too.
Yeah.
About the
so back to the talent. Yeah. So back to the talent. I definitely think Texas has recruited good talent. I think we've seen that a lot of times the talent's not developed, it's not coached, it's not all of those things. But even more than that, to me, it's the culture. It's the culture that Sark's created. It's what he's talked about since day one when he got here. We have to create the right culture. And it has to be a culture of love, of discipline, they use 8-9 words, accountability, all these things. And one of the things that he did to do that, starting 2 summers ago, they started Culture Wednesdays. So they would have some kind of activity where to create better culture, to talk to guys, learn more about each other, be able to express your feelings. And one of the things that I think Sark, maybe, I don't want to call it an advantage because of what it was, but it's one thing that he can maybe give that a lot of coaches can't, is what he went through with his alcohol issues at USC. And when he comes out and he's very vulnerable to his team about that, and they see a true, genuine person talking to them about, I've made these mistakes in the past. It cost him his dream job. He was the USC offensive coordinator in 2005. He was under Pete Carroll. It's everything you could ever want. And he did it to himself. And I think the ability for him to be able to step back and tell his team, I've done this. I've made these mistakes. I'm this vulnerable to you. You guys need to be that way with each other. You need to be that way with me, sure, but you need to be that way with each other. So Culture Wednesdays kind of develops. And at the end of the year last year, they have their player meetings, their exit meetings. And they said, he didn't even bring it up. He just said, what's the one thing that we did that you guys want more of, or that we didn't do enough of, or whatever? And that was it. They wanted more of that culture. They wanted to feel more connected. So they do that now on Fridays before games. They do something where they'll write a note to a teammate. He'll give each person a teammate. You write a note, say, here's why I appreciate you. Here's why I love you, whatever. And those type of things, I think, have really the players have to buy into it. Obviously, you've got to buy into your coach. You've got to buy into what he's trying to give to you. But they really have, and they talk about it every week. When we bring up things about the adversity they face in a game or whatever, they're like, we're all so connected that when something happens, we don't blame people. We just say, come on, we'll all go get it back together. And I think it's really unique these days in college football to be able to get that. And Sark talks a lot about, we've got to recruit talent, but we've got to recruit the character guys to our program. They're going to make it better. And it's all come together because of that. They've all bought into it because of those things. And I think that's probably carried them further than anything else has this year. Obviously, the talent's incredible. But I think that part of it has really changed who Texas is. It's been 14 years since they've, been this good. And I think that's, even those teams in 08 and 09, I think you saw some of those connections. And I think you're finally starting to see that again. A little more of a blue collar mentality as opposed to we deserve this, we're Texas, like all those kind of things. I still think they think those things, but now they're actually living out a different way of the kind of being vulnerable toward each other, loving more of your teammates, and being a more connected team.
Man, I can just hear Tom Herman now, man. All I had to do was talk about my feelings, and this team would have won, and I would have had this job forever.
Deion, doesn't that kind of remind – I mean, Oklahoma State prides itself on Cowboy culture and kind of the culture that's been established by having a Mike Gundy there for years. So it's interesting to hear that, because obviously we're taking probably less talented or lower star guys, but the part of it that you have to buy into is the culture part of it. So I think that's super interesting about what makes them different than a normal Texas team.
Yeah, and if you get the guys to buy into it, I think it does make, for all the hate that Texas fans gave Breece Hall when he said it's 5-star players against a 5-star culture in 2020, he was right. I mean, the culture at Iowa State, those guys aren't getting 5 stars and even 4 stars sometimes.
Right.
But when you see those, when it's a team, it changes everything. And I think Sark, I don't want to butcher this because I thought he said it so well, but he made the comment that, talent certainly trumps, he said culture trumps talent. But when you've got both, you can create something really special. And I think that's where he thinks he is right now, is we've got the culture now, but we've also got that 5-star talent that we can kind of combine together and make something not just for this year, but something that really extends long-term for Texas.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that kind of holds it down here at Oklahoma State, is that culture is established. And when a new guy comes in, it's like there's a blueprint right there for you. You don't have to, there's some guys you just, let me just wait out this coach, and when he's out of here, I can do it my own way. We can go back to doing low pressure activity. But at Oklahoma State, I mean, Coach Gundy's been there for a long time. He ain't no waiting him out. So
and listen, I heard a great stat this week about the college football playoff rankings, and they said there have been 58 weeks of rankings, and who are the 10 teams that have been in there the most? And it's the Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, all the teams that are powerhouses. And Oklahoma State's one of those 10 teams. And I think it's with good reason. It's because of the way Mike Gundy has built that culture and the way everybody kind of rallies around, like you guys said, the Cowboy culture. It really takes effect when the freshmen come in and see it happening. They can build on that. And obviously Mike's been there a long time too. And I think any kind of consistency like that can help a program.
So between the white lines, we've talked about both of these programs in depth and what makes them, so great and brings them to this moment where they can kind of collide and play for a Big 12 championship. But between the white lines, X's and O's wise, for Texas, we've talked about the strength and what's helped them succeed this year. But what are some of their weaknesses from X's and O's standpoint?
Yeah, I think the two biggest things that I think pop into my head, number one, playing with a lead. And not, Sark, when he came in, said all gas, no brakes. And it's just felt like at times there have been a lot of breaks, and maybe not on purpose, but, they're up 26-6 on TCU. All of a sudden they win 29-26. They're up 21-0 on Houston. They win 31-24. They weren't able to put away some of those teams. And I think if they had, we'd probably be having a little more conversation about Texas and Oregon than we're having right now. But they did Friday night, and you finally saw them say, yeah, it's 10-7 in the second quarter, and all of a sudden it's 26-7 at half. They come out and they return a kick for a touchdown. It's 33-7. I think them keeping their foot on the gas is going to be crucial, especially when you look at Oklahoma State, a team that loves to come back and make second half their thing. I mean, that's been as crazy as anything else. Obviously,
the fans don't love it. I can promise you that.
but no bigger than BYU, obviously, being down 18 and coming back to win that game. So I think that's number one. I think number two, Alan Bowman throwing the ball. As much as, listen, I don't know of a time I've been more fascinated to see a running back against a run defense than I have this week, because Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat in the middle are as good as we've seen in a long time in the country.
Yeah.
Probably some Alabama teams, but those in Georgia teams, but those two guys have been unbelievable. So watching that kind of take place is going to be fascinating. But what I think is the Texas defense is susceptible to the throw. I mean, their pass defense has been average. I mean, good, but okay. And that's why I think, like I said at the beginning, Ryan Watts is such a big deal. If Alan Bowman can get going through the air, I think that could really put some pressure on the Texas defense. And at some point, you're going to have to make a decision. Are we just going to continue to stop the run? And great, we allowed 4 yards passing or 4 yards rushing, but we gave up 350 passing. That's not great. So I think that's going to be a really interesting matchup. Is can the Oklahoma State pass game get going and really put some pressure on the Texas defense to make some decisions of what they're going to have to do adjustment wise.
I'm glad you mentioned T'Vondre Sweat, because I was watching some film and watching some games, and that guy is an animal. He is incredible. I wanted to talk about, obviously, you're probably going to guess this, the offensive side of the ball a little bit, and maybe we've talked a little bit about Quinn Ewers. We've talked about Xavier Worthy. Obviously, A.D. Mitchell's there. Who are some of the guys that are picking up the slack? Obviously, we saw Jonathan Brooks go down, which was obviously something that nobody wanted to see. But maybe at tailback, I've seen C.J. Baxter have a good game. They seem to be really deep. So who's maybe somebody out of that crew that we need to watch out for?
I think it's going to be interesting because, Jonathan Brooks, in my mind, was on his way to a possible trip to New York. I mean, he had 100 yards plus in, I think, every game but one, and it was an early game. He was so good. His vision in the open field to get past the defender, he was really good. So losing him, we thought, okay, that's going to be a blow. Well, C.J. Baxter actually won the starting running back job when this year started, and he was the starter as a true freshman. So, Jonathan Brooks kind of took that job from him. C.J.'s been good, and against Iowa State 2 weeks ago, he ran for 115 yards or somewhere around there, and kind of showed like, hey, I can be the guy. He was a little dinged up last week. I think he had a little bit of a hip pointer. So Jaden Blue comes in. Now, Jaden Blue starts the year as the third string running back. This guy has speed. He can fly. And so he comes in and he breaks off a 69-yard touchdown run and to give Texas a little bit of a cushion. It keeps going. Keelan Robinson's been a gadget guy for them. Offensively, he'll get 2, 3, 4, 5 touches a game. Speedster, they'll either swing it out to him. He scored his first touchdown on a swing pass. He's been good for them. Savion Red's been their fourth and one type guy, but then he actually got some carries in the second half, and he had 72 yards rushing. Trey Wisner has only played special teams as a true freshman this year. He comes in and has 60 yards and a touchdown rushing. So, that room was a real question mark for Texas going into this year, and it's kind of become a strength for them. And Sark has to be able to run the ball. He's talked so much. As much as you think about a guy like Sark and as creative as he is offensively, they've got to be able to run the ball. He's had a 1,000-yard rusher, I think, every year he's been an offensive coordinator. This season's been no different. Jonathan Brooks went over that mark. So I think somebody in that running back room, whether it's by committee or not, somebody's going to have to be really good for them there. The other guy that I always go back to, I think, you mentioned Adonai Mitchell, transfer from Georgia that comes in and has just been dominant this year. Jordan Whittington has been here for 50 years.
He is a guy. He's a Perry Ellis type guy that I'm like, man, he is. Or I guess a Spencer Sanders type guy.
Jordan Shipley is the one we always refer to here. So between those three guys, though, they're really good receiving, but they're really good blockers too, and that's been critical for Texas. I think the tight end position with Jatavion Sanders, Gunnar Helms had some moments this year. They've got so many weapons that as much as you want to say, I think this guy's going to be key. Like last week, I was like, I think Jatavion Sanders is going to be key. I think he had 2 or 3 or 4 receptions. He was good, and he's always good, but you just don't ever know where they're going to get their production from. And I think that's what's made them so good this year offensively. So I named about 7, 8, 9 guys instead of just one. But there's a reason. I mean, I think that's what's made them good is they've been able to distribute the ball in different ways. Even against OU, Xavier Worthy and Adonai Mitchell didn't do a ton. Jordan Whittington had, I think, 10 catches, and that was his biggest game of the year. His only touchdown this year came against Iowa State, but he's been really good for them offensively. So I think you'll see a little bit more of that as you watch Texas this weekend is even if Xavier Worthy's not producing, you'll find somewhere else that Adonai is, Jordan is, and Jatavion Sanders is, and it's really kind of helped Texas to be really successful offensively this year.
Bob, this is the last question that I have for you before we kind of get out of here. The atmosphere of the Big 12 championship. It seems like the Big 12 has done a lot to kind of bring this to the forefront and make it a fun, day and weekend. I mean, they just signed on with WWE to kind of make it a even more special deal, handing out a championship belt and being
Nelly.
at Jerry's World. Nelly's coming to tear down the house. Everybody, all those 90 babies are really excited about that. So
yes, I am.
So what's your thoughts on the atmosphere of the Big 12 championship and then Texas and OSU just being there?
Yeah, I for Texas OU, that's the only one I've experienced in 2018. It was great, and obviously it's Texas OU. You don't expect anything less. I do think it's weird. Like I think both schools only got 8,500 tickets. I think that part of it's really weird. But I know you can go buy tickets other places.
Saw they both sold out too recently.
Yeah, I mean, that's not surprising. I think with what this game brings, with what it means for Texas, obviously Texas fans haven't been in this position a lot, so they're going to want to be there. They're going to come in droves.
Yeah,
I think Oklahoma State wanting to beat Texas one more time. If it had been Texas, or again, you're playing for a Big 12 title. Like when they played Baylor 2 years ago, I'm sure it was a great atmosphere, but it just feels like there's going to be a little more with this one. When it's Oklahoma, when it's Texas, it feels like, Oklahoma State, that those are, you consider them. I know Oklahoma's obviously a rival, but I think you could consider Texas a rival just because of the way this is developed. So I think there's going to be a lot of passion in the stadium. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think there are a lot of guys on that field. They're going to want that WWE belt.
Yeah.
They want to be the MVP and get that thing. What a hilarious addition, right?
Yeah.
Like perfect for Brett Yormark, right up his alley for exactly the way he's taking this conference. But yeah, those kind of things are fun. I just think with Texas leaving to go to the SEC, it's one more chance for a fan base to really get their parting shots in, their last yells, and get really mad at the Texas fans as they're walking in the stadium. And for Texas fans, it's one last chance to win a conference championship in this league, which, again, they've only done 3 times in 27 years. So there's not like – this hasn't been an overwhelming – like Texas, everybody talks about Texas runs the conference. They've won 3 in 27 years, guy. Like this has not been Texas football has not been why Texas has been so great. So I know that they want it for that reason. I know the fans here are really excited about an opportunity, not just to – the possibility of making the playoff, but to win one more Big 12 title as they go out. I mentioned I went to Mizzou. I was at the Mizzou Baylor game in the 2012 SEC basketball or Big 12 basketball tournament in Kansas City, and Missouri fans were losing their mind, chanting SEC and all those type of things. I kind of rolled my eyes at all of it, to be honest, but like fans love that stuff. And if Texas gets a chance in the fourth quarter to be up 4 touchdowns and they can start chanting SEC, they're going to.
Oh yeah,
it's ridiculous. If Oklahoma State's up 4 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, they'll probably start chanting SEC because it's hilarious the other way too. So I think that's what's going to make this great. Is it really is a game. This isn't going to be like Kansas State and Baylor, or 2 teams that are like we're still going to be in this conference. It's going to be this is like 2 teams that have a real passion for football, a real passion to win this thing on Saturday. And I think it's going to make for a great atmosphere in Arlington.
And the element of that, if you're online at all, it seems like, Texas winning it and getting it right away and have it forever. We got the final one when we were there. And then all the other teams kind of coming to Oklahoma State's side, at least, most of them saying, you can't let them do that and take the final one when they leave. I think that'll be an interesting part. But also something that Deion knows better than me, and this is my last comment, is – for Oklahoma State and a lot of these guys, a lot of our rosters from Texas, and typically is.
Right.
So it's always a big game, and Deion knows, like I said, he knows that more than me. Playing Texas, the school that they probably a lot of kids wanted to go to and didn't get the offer, it always makes it for an even bigger game. So I think that'll add an element to it as well. But
that brings up one of my favorite Mac Brownisms that he would always say. There are 350 kids, D1 kids in Texas. We can only get 25 of them every year. And I'd be like, we know you can't get all of them. We get but he would always bring that up. Like anytime we'd be like, oh, this quarterback was from Texas and he's not here or whatever. Yeah, I know. We had to go get these other guys or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think there's a fun atmosphere for the players on the Oklahoma State roster from Texas to get to come back home and beat Texas one last time for sure.
Oh, Mac Brown. God bless Texas high school football, and God bless the Texas High School Coaches Association.
Oh, I like it. That's a good impression. I love it. I love it.
Bob, it's been great. Appreciate you coming on and taking some time to talk a little ball with us. I look forward to the game, and I know all of our listeners really appreciate you coming on and being able to shed some insight into Texas football for us.
I love it. This was a lot of fun, guys. Anytime I can hop on with you and give any kind of insight into anything, please don't hesitate to reach out, because this was a blast, and hope to see you both on Saturday.
Yeah, I'll see you in Arlington. And that was Bob Ballou from CBS Austin. Man, Clint, that was a good one. What'd you think?
Yeah, he was great, man. I hope you guys really enjoyed that. I know we did. Very, very gracious with this time coming on and giving us, a little information in the weeds about the Texas Longhorns. I think, there was two things that I thought were super interesting, and I hadn't thought of them from his perspective. At least the first one, and that's the pressure on the team in the college football playoffs, and kind of being able to play free, knowing that if they lose, they're out. Because my thought was that, they have to have a good showing.
Yeah.
They have to play very well to make it to the college football playoff. I still think if they win, I think they're in. Probably regardless of what happens, there may be a few scenarios. I think Texas
they needed a lot of help though, Clint, because they still need Washington to lose technically to Oregon, and then you need
they need
not have a good showing. So
they probably need Washington to win.
You think Washington to win? Because Washington's in that fourth spot, and then
Washington's 3, Oregon's 5. So if Oregon wins that game, they're in. Washington would have one loss in a championship game. Does that knock them below Texas losing to OU? I don't know, but that's neither here nor there. You could be right. I don't know. They do need some help, but in my mind, they have the best win as of now. I guess you could argue the Michigan against Ohio State, but that was at home. Going on the road to Alabama with what Alabama has done now, I don't think you can discredit that. So you're right. There's probably 1,000 scenarios, but I just think that perspective was something I hadn't thought about, because in my mind, I'm like, the last 2 years, TCU, Oklahoma State 2 years ago, have come in with the better team and more pressure because they needed to win the game, and they both lost. So at least from that perspective, it made sense. And then the other thing that I thought he talked about that was interesting was obviously the matchup with Ollie Gordon and the Texas run defense, right? And as you know, and I know, something we've talked about is if Texas can run their base defense and not commit extra guys to the box, and they can drop guys in coverage, it will be very hard for Oklahoma State. The teams that we've seen – go ahead.
And honestly, it might be what they have to do, especially if Ryan Watts isn't in the game, because they're good, they're talented, but they're really young on the outside. And if they can say, hey, if we can stop the run with our big dominant defensive line, and then give some help to our guys, because Johnson and Owens and Presley, those guys have had a really, really solid finish to the year. I'd be interested to see what that matchup looks like on the outside with those guys.
Agreed. I think it's all predicated on if they can stop our running attack without committing extra bodies to the box, like what we've seen from every other team. Every other team has typically tried to take it away with run blitzes, slants, pinching, adding guys to the box, and it's left them vulnerable on the back end. And, Alan Bowman's thrown for a lot of yards. He's made some bad decisions, obviously, thrown a few picks. But if it will be a lot harder, I can tell you that, if they don't have to commit more guys and they have a lot of guys in the back end. So that's an interesting matchup that he pointed out that I think is really the key to the game.
Yeah. On the opposite side, it's going to be interesting to see which one of those Texas running backs kind of gets the bulk of the carries and is going to be the kind of workhorse. I mean, when you hear everybody talking from that Texas side, it seems like they really want to be able to run the football. You heard what Sark said. He's made it known throughout his career that he wants to run the football. And if CJ Baxter can kind of, have a good game against us, it's going to be really tough to defeat the Longhorns. But if we can kind of slow down that rushing attack, hopefully allow our defensive linemen to keep our linebackers clean and let them, kind of flow to the ball a little better than they have in these last couple of weeks. I don't know. It could be an interesting matchup.
Yeah, I think my key for that side of the ball is if Xavier Worthy, because I think he can be the guy that gets on our safeties like we've seen and blows past them and is kind of the big play guy for them. So his health and if we can affect Quinn Ewers enough, that'll be my key, because he could be a guy that, like I said, he's the one that his speed really scares me with what we've seen teams up against our safeties.
That cover 3 got to be deep. Got to be deep, Clint.
Yeah.
Number 1 gets over the top of you. It's good night, baby. It's good night.
Yeah.
So hopefully our guys are, as we speak, preparing for this big matchup on Saturday at AT&T Stadium. It should be a fun one just to be in the building in Jerry's world for the Big 12 championship, playing Texas for the last time in the Big 12. It's going to be fun.
Absolutely well said. I think this is an absolute great matchup. It's very cool to have the opportunity to beat OU, beat Texas, the 2 teams leaving. We weren't going to obviously get that chance unless we made it to the Big 12 championship game. It's been a roller coaster of a season. Yeah. They made it happen. You get the opportunity. So I'm very, very much looking forward to it and excited to be down there to watch it. Yeah,
should be a blast. Well, you ready to get out of here, Clint?
I am finished. I hope everybody enjoyed Bob and the content we put out this week. We appreciate all you guys listening. If you're driving down, stay safe while you're driving down, and can't wait to hopefully be celebrating with you guys here in a week.
Yeah, speaking of celebrating and coming on down, OSU Max has more original content for you guys this week. On Friday, they will be doing a show at AT&T Stadium. I'll be a part of it. We'll have maybe some former players and a bunch of other individuals join with us to talk about this big matchup versus Texas and talk about the year as a whole. And then on Saturday morning, they're also going to have a pregame show for you guys as well, with more former players and other individuals talking about the matchup versus Texas. So stay tuned with OSU Max. They got all the information, all the content, and all the access that you need. And your friends don't have the access, go ahead and tell them to get on it right now, because this is the week that you need it. Definitely need it.
Well said.
Yeah. Well, like we always say here at the Old Poke Show, remember, stay loyal and true.
Go Pokes.